From the southernmost point of Dorne to the lands of always winter and what is west of Westeros and the shadows in the east, this is Casterly Talk. I'm Ken Napzok, and we are here to take a look, a deep dive discussion of episode 4 of season 1 of House of the Dragon, King of the Narrow Sea. Ira Parker, the credited writer, and the director, Clare Kilner, the first female to direct a Game of Thrones World of Westeros episode since, well, about season 4, Michelle McLaren. An oversight, an unfortunate thing, but House of the Dragon aims to do things a little differently. But we're going to dive into that because there's a lot to talk about with that episode. Join me tonight is Alden Diaz here to discuss it all. Alden, how are you doing, my friend?
Well, as you know, I was wearing a hoodie when I logged on, and I took it off because the episode was too hot. Super spicy. This is, you know,
Westeros night.
Oh yeah, Game of Thrones, reputation, dragons and sex. We've delivered on the former, and now we will deliver on the latter. And it was a lot. There was a lot of machinations here, my friend.
Big machinations, and yes, a lot of sex, a lot of pleasure, a lot of desire, a lot of duty. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the scenes, how it was shot, and it's just us here tonight. Andres and Rachel couldn't make the show tonight. We wish them good fortune in the wars to come of having an actual social life, but Alden and I are up late. You're up way later than me, which I always should tip my beanie that I'm wearing in the heat to you. We record live to tape late on the West Coast, later for you, sir. What do you ramp up with some energy drinks? How do you do this? Are you just young?
It's normally coffee, but then I was like, I need to decrease my heart rate, but I still want to fill my mug. So I have hot chocolate tonight, like an adult.
like you're in a Timothy Zahn expanded universe novel. Love that.
Exactly. That's like a deep cut on an already deep cut.
Yes, deep cut that I think it was Adam Christopher had a lot of fun with in Shadows of the Sith. Enough about Star Wars. I'm sure we'll come back into play, but let's do a quick summary of this episode. Say it with me. Some time has passed, about 1 year since the previous week's episode, but the issues at hand remain the same. Rhaenyra has been touring the realms and still taking applications for the man who will take her hand in marriage. It's tiring, it's tedious, and it's full of duty and no personal satisfaction. We catch up with her at Storm's End, something we get to see on camera there as Rhaenyra tries to navigate through her role as queen-to-be and perhaps move beyond its constraining walls. Alicent is alone in her world as queen, craving lost connections and very much dying a slow death, so to speak, as she tries to survive within those constraining walls. Uncle Daemon has returned, now the king of the Narrow Sea, and he dramatically lays down his what looks like homemade crown before his brother and seems to reconcile with the queen that banished him from this court years ago, about 4 years since the pilot. But Daemon is still the man he always was, is, and will be, and is back to strike a blow at his brother, setting his sights on Rhaenyra and setting in motion some of the most salacious drama and machinations yet this season. All of it centered around the realm being obsessed and trying to control the desires and pleasure of one young woman's heart. Alden, let's dive in. Your overall thoughts on this episode, King of the Narrow Sea.
Well, this episode, I think, can best be described in a visual that it itself shows us a tightrope walk. There is somebody in the flea bottomy areas where they descend into, lots of performers and everything, and there's somebody walking a tightrope, and this is the power of bringing in people beyond your perspective. This material needed a woman there guiding the camera, guiding the script as was given. And I think it's a great script, but it takes that eye to really emphasize what, things you and I never had to go through, being a young woman of 19, I believe, because I think she's 15 in the pilot. And so, so now a 19-year-old woman,
18, 19.
I've, never had to deal with those problems, but to see them so intimately explored and to see this fight for freedom and this fight for, feeling liberated, and Alicent on the flip side, feeling so imprisoned, literally in bed with a man who is quite literally falling apart, who is decomposing, the previous generation rotting on top of her.
I put that note down too, rotting, because that's what it is.
Yeah, it's devastating. And then Daemon, a man who so desperate to not be perceived by others and to control his own narrative, will confess to crimes that, as we know, didn't actually commit. not in the ways that are talked about in terms of perception, and that is the ultimate weapon here. So I loved the episode that came down to we'll show you, the audience, the truth, but it doesn't matter. I thought it was bold, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, this I love that we're going to talk a lot about the perceptions there. That's a hard truth sometimes, and the unreliable narrator, which is often key to stories in this world. George R. Martin seems to love that, and with good reason. It's so much the way it is here. But I did want to talk with you. Yeah, big issue, and you and I here tonight, the only ones talking about this episode here in Casterly Talk. But also to say, so sometimes I love the different perspectives. Love having Rachel and others, and Lauren have been on the show, Michelle Boyd in the past too. But for you and I discuss it, actually, in a weird way for me, go with me here, makes some sense, where I think House of the Dragon has been not so subtle in what it's trying to communicate. And this is very much from my perspective of who it's trying to reach. There's a lot of people who are watching this episode going, yeah, that's how it is. It's how it is there. It's how it is in that fantasy world, and how it is here because I've lived it. Women or other marginalized communities, however you want to connect with some of the core things going on in the season, it's there. And it's for men like us generally who I think love the violence, the dragons, the knights, the sex, all those kind of salacious things. And you're coming into, and that's fun. That's fine. But I think this show is just kind of clobbering some people over the head with a hammer. I hope they get it. I hope they see it. This is what it is. Are you getting this? Are you connecting with this? Is this, you have a problem with this? Do you maybe understand Rhaenyra's side? Do you see Alicent's side? I don't know if the show's always going to be perfect in that. I don't know if it's been perfect already. So four episodes in, but it is at least there for me. And I think you're right. It was key to have Clare Kilner to direct this episode. And whether that's well received or going to be well received, or it's viewed with some understandable cynicism, the brand of Game of Thrones does not have a lot of trust in how it deals with women-centered issues. Media doesn't have a lot of trust, let's be honest, going back. And that's something we've talked about before here. But I thought this episode was at least making steps to address some of those criticisms in the show's original run and in its approach to some of the storytelling, some of the choices, and not even the choices. The choices sometimes are fine, but it's how you shoot it and whose eyes you're seeing it with and seeing it through. And this episode, I thought at least made the big effort, and it hit and it worked for me. We could sometimes only say for me when it's opinionated based discussions, but it really worked. You saw it through Alicent's eyes, which was at times horrific and sad and lonely. And you saw it through Rhaenyra's eyes, which in a series that's been very somber so far, and in a kind of a good way. All right. I kind of wanted that, some Game of Thrones somberness. This was the biggest burst of joy. And it was Rhaenyra going out and getting what she wants. And I felt that it was effective for me, as well as the big time lessons.
Absolutely. Rhaenyra, you said it there, getting what she wants, taking control, almost, playing with fire and then it not working out, but not falling back, continuing to embrace carpe diem and deciding, well, if it ain't going to be him, it's going to be you. And let me say, as somebody that like you, we consume a lot of stories, a lot of big worlds, a lot of worlds that are expansive with lots of stories within them. And I haven't seen every movie in the world, obviously, but I've seen a lot. I don't think I've ever seen the archetypal role reversal of the knight, of the man's man, being sort of the flower in the scene, him being undressed and him being completely the one that's thrown for a loop. Like, what is happening? My goodness, this doish eyes, the doish eyes that you see normally on damsels were there with Kristen Cole while she's joking around, disarming, playful, charismatic. I think Millie Alcock is like so good that I'm going to be heartbroken when we do the time jump. And that's not to say I'm not excited for the Emma and Olivia era, because they are incredible performers, but it's like, oh man, she's so good that I want them now to, can we see those season 2 scripts and work some flashbacks in, just like we can have her again? She's phenomenal in this.
Yeah, no, look, and again, this is again, it's not subtle. It's not subtext here. It's this idea that women and yes, many other identities and perspectives and experiences are, a lot of these folks are just not afforded the same liberties and choices and even simply the same pleasures that men in this world, and therefore men in our world, are allowed. And I just thought this episode wanted to sit with that for a bit, play around with a bit, but it wasn't. I liked Alden. That's that part, the Rhaenyra section there. Again, there's a lot going on with Damon. His sense of control, power, he's always part of the problem. just part of the lesson for me. But once it kind of shifted to Rhaenyra going, you know what? I saw what's out there beyond these walls. I'm going to take it. And you're right, Kristen Cole trying to hold on to his vows, but wanting this as much. But her in control, shot kind of through her eyes. I felt it. It was good about. It was good for me on that. But we'll dive into a little bit more about that there. There's a lot going on here, and I think in this overall episode, it's easy. It could be easy, Alden, to look beyond episodes like this. Very talky, right? Very chatty. A lot of low whispered machinations. But I love that stuff. I think Game of Thrones, World of Ice and Fire fans, Song of Ice and Fire fans love that kind of stuff, right? And even though this show has so far, and you've said it so well, sir, has jumped to the meat and not been afraid to take those big leaps to where the story needs to go, but then it slows down. Rachel talked about that definitely from an editor's perspective and a storytelling perspective. This episode really slowed down, and there wasn't the big fighting. The different kind of action. I think when it's all said and done, this is going to be considered one of the key episodes in this first season.
I completely agree. I mean, this is the one that played with all of the character growth and development up to this point, playing our expectations, playing with our knowledge. It was a really big audience engagement one where if you took it on its terms, you were met with almost contradictory feelings of satisfaction. Like if you take what happens with Otto in this episode, we've wanted to see Viserys stand up to this guy. We've wanted to see Viserys emphasize integrity and cut out the BS and go so far as to fire this guy. Just so happens that we have the definitive truth as viewers. And we know that, yes, he does deserve what happened to him, but he was also right this time. And so there's a lot of those dramatic ironies of us watching an unreliable narrator text. We don't do a lot of the, like, how does it compare to the writing? Because we're talking about the show. But on that note, we've said it before on Casterly Talk, Fire and Blood is unreliable. It's written from the perspective of maesters, many of whom were Hightower folks anyways, like more leaning that way. So there's a bent there. This idea of, was it her uncle that took her virginity? Was it Sir Kristen Cole? Was it this and that? Being able to take elements of all of those and say, here's the truth, and the characters will still come to their conclusions and why. You have Alicent in the Godswood throwing these accusations out there, wanting to know the truth, but it's always what is being said underneath. Always what's being said underneath with Alicent, and really with Viserys too. What she's really saying is you know how desperate I would be, like like what I would do for a night out, and you squander it. Like there's an envy there and a pain. It's so powerful to see, like when things go down, when we get that trailer shot of Olivia Cook with the dagger lunging at her, it's because of these moments.
Yeah. No, I loved the Alicent and Rhaenyra stuff in this episode. One of it is because especially towards the beginning, there's a little bit of like an honest connection, right? And you're reminded of it. You're reminded of the connection, a direct reminder of what was there between them, what could be there. I always say this world has really positioned them against each other. This idea of women against women type of atmosphere that I think is being played at. You got these two friends or more, which was played in a certain way in the early episode, the pilot episode, pulled apart. But it was a nice thing for me, Alden, to see them, like, especially when Rhaenyra let the guard down a little bit, just to kind of be like, I need this moment too, and have Alicent being like, I'm just lonely. I'm so alone. I'm so alone there. It was great. And then juxtaposition. Wow, a lot of X's in that word.
We got there.
At a late night. My word burritos explode on me every once in a while. To see it later in the episode, when I almost thought that was like, I wondered aloud to myself of like, is this the actual, if you're mapping the relationship between them, Alicent kind of coming to Rhaenyra to be like, hey, I got to tell you something, but also, what did you do? Is kind of this one of the final breaks between them when it's all said and done. When you look back and be like, they tried, but this moment, that you didn't have my back, and also, what'd you do?
And people deciding things for them. I mean, Rhaenyra has so many parallels with her uncle Daemon, and for better and for worse, has always leaned toward his, like, as Viserys says, they both have the blood of the dragon, and it's stressing me out, like that, in so many words. But he, like, that was what happened with the brothers, was Viserys and all of his small council boys deciding what Daemon was for him. And that's happening here with Rhaenyra, and she's butting up against that. But I loved that human moment after, the celebration of Daemon's victory, everyone having some wine outside. We'll talk about his entrance. Yeah, a little luncheon.
Like
That moment, that moment of maybe your brother would like to see the tapestries, and her just being laughed off was,
yes.
I mean, that it's like, it tells you, yes, he does love her as much as he can love his second wife. Very clearly, still, Aemma is his first love, and he's been clear about that. But he loves her, appreciates her, does take her word, in terms of the crab feeder, was willing to listen to her. But it's a reminder of, like, you will never really be in. You're still the young second wife.
Yeah.
And that sets up the moment of the brilliant choice to just have a moment of her holding her crying baby, turns to camera, looks like she's about to cry herself, and then we just move on from that. That's just there as a visual nod of, this is the story that we're telling. And that's why I've been sympathetic to her the whole time. I see these two, and I want to step in and be like, this is the problem, ladies. We can solve this, but it's not going to be that way.
It's interesting. I wrote down this note too of sympathy for Alicent, and sometimes I see in the online discussion of this show, which I try not to keep maybe one half of an eye on. There's a lot of folks that cite stuff that might happen down the line that we know of, or at least could possibly happen. We'll see how the show goes. But you and I have always discussed, as well as with others on this channel, of once an actor gets in there, the energy and their own take on it, just the writers and directors. There's so much stuff to go into it. I every week find myself feeling more sympathy for Alicent and just wondering, when's going to be the final breaking point? What is she going to do? And what are those steps to, like, finally get what she wants? It's one of these big themes. And we're going to dive into the theme. I think one of the biggest themes of this episode is duty versus desire. And that word desire is shown in a lot of different ways in this episode, but also the anchor of duty, or the belief that duty becomes above desires. And Alicent is just she's in that game to survive and hold on to the duties and bury those desires. And I'm just wondering when the breaking point is going to happen and how it's going to play out,
Yeah, I mean, she's reconciling with the truth that is bubbling to the surface about her own father. And she has known that she was a pawn, but up until this point, the fact that he makes people pawns was not discussed by House Targaryen. Like, outside of Daemon calling him a "see you next Tuesday," we had never seen Viserys and Rhaenyra and all of these people start to say, yeah, you know what, Otto does suck. So she's dealing with that. Yeah. And it's bringing back these feelings from the king's days of grieving and everything, and it's making everything sort of come to a head where she's having to say, I'm reconciling my duty with my desires, but I don't think I've ever even been allowed to have desires. I don't know what those are. I don't know who I am without Otto pushing me around. And now with him on the outs, it's like, now you have to be your own woman. And, there's the next time, and, I'm not going to talk about an episode that hasn't come out yet, but seems like it's going to be a huge element. So now it's a sink or swim moment for her when, as we already said, she's, who is her closest friend? Somebody who's literally rotting, somebody that chose her, yes, in a moment of passion, but also in a moment of rebellion. Like, yes, Viserys is a grown man. It doesn't mean that he's immune to moments of lashing out. The effects of rejecting Laena are still lingering. Corlys not in this one, but he's all over it. And his actions and his deeds, and Laenor. And I mean, we haven't even seen Rhaenys in a while, but that, her presence too lingers throughout this entire thing. We get that those players in the street doing the play about the succession and what's going on there. And Daemon saying, no, you need to see this. It's very valuable, which is something that Game of Thrones did all the time, was you need to be engaged with people. They do not care about your world.
They do not care. Yeah, no, it's valuable. And I love this particular type of thing of a character seeing a play about their story. We saw it play out with Arya before, among others. I actually really like it. I just like it because that is the lay of the land. That's how you get the feel. You saw some stuff with Tyrion, kind of, who are they talking? They're talking about me. I love that stuff. It is art as communication in art. It's reminding us the power of it, and it's also perspective, and it's also no matter what the truth is, that's the truth, right?
That's the truth. That's been there since the beginning. I mean, when you're in a Game of Thrones mood, you're always going down the clip rabbit holes. Even if you don't rewatch episodes, I just end up like, let me watch the best of Robb Stark seasons 2 and 3. Like, I'll just do stuff like that sometimes. And you have the moment with Arya and Tywin where he's like, and what do they say of Robb Stark in the North?
Yeah.
He's not asking that because he cares about what statistics and actual strategies they can give. It's Tywin Lannister and certain characters like Otto, who he is sort of an analog for in some ways, like Daemon. There are people that understand that truth is not power, perception is power. You give power to words, true or not. So when Arya says, some say that he could turn into a giant wolf, like, it doesn't matter if he can or not.
Yeah,
they think he can, and it doesn't matter. Otto's point, like, well, it doesn't. Even if the White Worm's facts, and we'll get to her, even if the White Worm's facts are not completely legit or whatever, she's never led me astray, and it's the idea that this happened that is damaging to the crown, and he's not wrong, even if he must go.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna. Yeah, I always say we're gonna talk about that. We might as well start talking about everything. There were some big moments and reveals. Some of them key, all of them key to the plot. But yeah, Rhaenyra agreeing to marry Laenor Velaryon is key, coming to the very end of the episode. It also ties her to the question of duty and desire. Where does she hears that early on of Corlys maybe looking to Bravos, and so she understands. Again, I think this thing with Rhaenyra, it's like, it's not that she. Right now, she might be saying some things that are specifically against marriage or children, or, I want to live in solitude. That's maybe not always going to be the story of this character, but it's about choice, and she just wants choice. And when you feel you don't have the choice, you might just then, I want to be alone because I'd rather do that than have the choice. But so she understands the weight of the duty, and comparing it to the desire. I thought that was big. We're going to get to the street of Silk. You talked a little bit about Rhaenyra and what the realm really thinks. We're going to talk about Daemon and his impotence, his complete loss of power in that scene. And then we are going to talk also about, like you said, about Otto Hightower getting the pink slip. And the very end, the king sending the moon tea in, showing that, I took it, I looked at it, and there's a lot of ways maybe to slice it, but as Rhaenyra is not believed, even though, it's more about Daemon than Kristen Cole. Again, from that point of view, it's about Daemon, and she knows what really happened, and the king is not going to take her word, or Alicent's word. I think it was a pretty powerful ending there. So that's all on the table. Where do you want to go first? Do you want to start with that because you started to talk and I cut you off?
No, it's okay. No, actually, Ken, what I really want to talk about is the young lad who destroyed someone at Storm's End at the beginning. Now, that's not really a big point, but I did want to highlight him. He's hilarious. That moment was such a great, like, you want to talk about they subverted expectations. That's a subversion of expectation, because they cut away from the fight and they cut back just to show that he won. It's so funny.
I got to tell you, I'm glad you brought that up. Again, it's House Blackwood, right? I think it's what they said. I forgot to write that in the notes. I love that because, he pulls the sword and you're thinking everyone's going to laugh, and they're walking away. And then when the fight's happening and then you hear the stabbing, years of watching and reading this stuff, I thought this kid lost his head. They're going to show a 9-year-old in your head, because that's the way the show's up. No, they went the way it needed to go. The bully gets his. And, I never want to say violence solves bully issues here. Don't want to say that. But in this particular moment, I may have cheered.
Yeah, it was a total F around and find out. So shout out to that young hero. Great to see Storm's End, and appropriate that the house of the literal house of House Baratheon would be a place where violence would just pop off immediately, with those hot-headed stags. But yeah, I mean, talking about that ending, like you said, it's about Viserys and his daughter have now come to terms that are public facing. Yeah. She said, I will do this, but you will do this. And to his credit, he bends, because he is trying desperately to be father and king. And he does, take his daughter's word at that level. Mm-hmm. But then some time passes and he's like, well, maybe from his perspective, he's like, I fired him because you are right that his judgment is, but I'm smart enough to know that nobody has 100% of the facts. Mm-hmm. You give me 100% rejection. Daemon gives me easy admission of guilt. And yet that is, we'll talk about Daemon in depth in a bit, but like Viserys is enough to be confused in that scene with Alicent, where he's like, he tells me this, why would he confess? How does it serve him? What's going on? So I think that with that, he's like, you know what? I fired my guy. She's going to marry Laenor, but I got to take out an insurance policy on this in a certain way. Like, I got to make sure that this is this is fine. And it emphasizes once again the pain of women in this, not in this era. It's not a real era, but in this setting.
Yeah, in the setting, and I think that again, this show is to be taken out of this the walls of its storytelling and put into our world, and you got two, particularly as it relates to Daemon and Rhaenyra. Not putting Kristen Cole on the ledge there. Daemon and Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra's telling the truth. Alicent supports her. Here's this woman's truth, believes her, and Viserys essentially believes Daemon. I to look at an insurance policy, I'm getting sure from there, but that's what it said, and that's that look on Rhaenyra's face at the end, and she knows, she feels it, and it was at first I was kind of surprised, like, oh, that's the end, and then on second viewing, I really like that ending. It really hit for me, struck a chord.
There's a nice rhythm to be made across Game of Thrones and now into the show of understated, not overstated, but really bombastic, coming off of the battle with the crab feeder. It's like we're not going to send you home on those kinds of highs every time, because that's not what we need. This is a story of
we can't take it.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, how many of those false surrenders can we do, and those bloodbaths? But that's the power of the show, is that we can have one end in bloodbath, and we can have one end in a here's the Westeros equivalent of the morning after pill. And it's being given to you by somebody that doesn't trust you, even though they say they do, and even though they say that you have this responsibility. So there's a lot of contradictory things being said to her, sending her feelings and emotions and beliefs into chaos. And again, this idea of him believing Daemon's so obsessed with making sure that he is the only one in control of his narrative, that he will initiate these sexual acts. But then once he's no longer the A personality in those acts, can't perform and backs off. And as they say in the inside the episode, realizes the error of his ways, realizes that this is wrong and that it's not what he wanted, and that it was a play against his brother.
Yeah.
And then she goes and tells the truth. And as Millie Alcock points out, never actually lies. Because they did not actually consummate this relationship. It did not happen. It was some hot and heavy making out, which of course is already scandal for the royal family. But in terms of what they would need to be concerned about for her, her status for another lord is not actually in question. But then Daemon just doesn't deny, doesn't try to control the narrative, doesn't talk to Rhaenyra about what they're going to say. He confesses to more than actually happened, because he is of the mind of, if that's what you want to paint of me, then go right ahead, because I don't care. He's sort of functioning on that higher than Daemon would fit in 200 years later with like the Varys crowd of people that see things for what they really are, free of tradition, free of precedent, all of that. And it's just sad to see it all go down this way. Even when they're still striking parallels with the brothers. He's got Aegon's dagger at his throat, and then Daemon invokes Aegon. Like, these brothers are both children of history. They joke about their childhood. They were getting along really well at the beginning of this.
Social.
So it's fascinating to see the way that people all spin one night's events.
How did you like the Daemon in the story, especially coming off of last week, which is, it was a heroic moment in a way, right? It was definitely a heroic moment if you're rooting for Daemon, but also just in terms of action. No one's not a lot of people rooting for the crab feeder. It's rebirth. It's rebirth, literal. We talked about that imagery, and he comes back, and it's not that it was all a lie. It almost was like that rebirth might have been just confirmation of what I want to do, and what I want to do is whatever Daemon wants to do, and I got to go get my brother a year later. I don't know. I just like that. I liked because I think for a moment I fell for it. Right when they're clapping and he takes it, I was like, oh, look at this. He's a new man. He's a team player. Then I'm like, what am I thinking? What am I thinking? That doesn't happen in this world.
Because that's the thing, right? It's I talked about this last time when we saw the preview of it. Now we have it in full context. We love all fantasy. We're Star Wars guys. The cutting of the hair is key. Any hair change is key. That's a huge mythic symbol. He was caked in blood last time. Perfect long locks, disheveled. And now he returns. He's got this wooden crown, whether he fashioned it himself for the drama or if it was actually fashioned for him by his boys, who knows?
Probably. Little column A, little column B.
Maybe, yeah. or he beat someone up and said, "Make me a crown."
Yeah, it's good. Look,
But
I'm in a weird way. I've always been a fan of House Greyjoy, which is just weird. It ties to a part I played in a web series where I was
yeah,
Coach Balon. But they got a nice homespun crown. It's all
they
right.
do, they do, yeah, yeah. So yeah, sort of tying into that, he's a man. He's a man of many cultures, but
Yeah,
he shows up with this symbolism of change, looking fresh, hair shorter, deferring to the older brother.
mm,
And it's all these things, but like when that happens, when somebody, I think of Kanan Jarrus in Star Wars Rebels, and I don't want to spoil that because this is not a Star Wars channel, but there is a moment where he does cut his hair off. He's got long hair the whole show, and then his hair is short. And it represents getting to the truth of Kanan Jarrus, which is not even his name, and that's a whole other thing. So with that in mind, of like, we're getting to the truth of who we are, that doesn't necessarily mean the truth is going to jive with everybody. It doesn't mean you're better. It means you're more truthful. And truthful is not, the truthful sounds like a good word, but if the truth is negative, then the truth is negative. And if the truth is that Daemon is this agent of chaos, then that's what he is. He has come back now with an extra thing on his resume to validate the way he was already feeling as this solo operator, as one of the two malcontents, as Viserys calls him. So it's almost this playing with audience perceptions of, oh, he's a conquering hero and there's a hug, and he's now, literally cut things away and has really reemerged, and he attends this party. But what is his truth? That's what you're asking. It's and in an episode about really saying the truth doesn't matter once the narratives are started, he's the one saying, narratives be damned. I am myself. I owe you nothing. And that's what Viserys is saying. He doesn't fall to his knees before the Iron Throne and say, yes, I slept with her. He just refuses to deny and leans into whatever Viserys says, because I don't want to compare him to the Joker, because in today's internet age, I just can't with the Joker comparison sometimes, but there is a little bit of that I'm ahead of the curve, Dark Knight energy in coming off of him.
I get it. We'll go to Joker talk a little bit later in another podcast feed. No, great stuff there. What are some of the big themes out there that you like? This duty versus desire, emotional freedom versus emotional captivity. A lot of things going on here. This idea of hard lessons aren't welcome, but suffered. Massaria said that. We're going to talk about her as the White Worm. A lot to get to. What jumps to your head next year?
The imprisonment stuff is fascinating to me, especially as we look at what a prison is and what freedom is. It depends on the person. Viserys Targaryen has the highest seat in the land and the world, even, and it is killing him. And whether that plays into the superstitions about the throne, about some sort of mystical element, is all up to every viewer and every reader, and that's cool. I like that they do that. But what we are seeing factually, whatever the cause is, he is rotting away in the Red Keep. Alicent is bearing witness to it, and sometimes she has help, and sometimes she sends the help away because she's trying any way to reconcile with it. She is still being used to create heirs even while he's rotting away, and so that's a prison. And the idea that you can be a prison in your own relationships, the way that Viserys, like, he doesn't fire Otto directly because of the events of that couple days. He sends it all the way back to something that we hadn't seen, something to do with his father, Balon the brave, or the bold, the brave, I think, Balon the brave, and tells this story about recontextualizing everything Otto had done, realizing in that moment, almost in real time, that the prison he was in was Otto's thumb. That's the prison that he's been in. And the fact that it's like, I thought it was cool, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was intentional. Rhaenyra saying, your hand. And then it's like, my hand is actually falling apart. Like, it's the visual representations are all over of how these people are all, like, everybody is somebody else's jail warden. Like, no one else can get away from each other.
No, I love that. I think there's an absolute connection between his hand falling apart and his hand of the king slowly kind of undermining him. And I love that scene. I love the realization. Otto Hightower has been an interesting character. Like I said, I was kind of primed to root for him in this weird way before the series even started. Again, having read Fire and Blood, I know it, but it's like all the little details do kind of escape my mind. I'm just like, let me start clean with this series. I like this guy. I like that. There's part of me that likes Tywin. And there's just something, I'm happy, whereas I have a lot of sympathy for Alicent, I think earned sympathy. I'm finding myself, Alden, having less and less sympathy for Otto, but I still feel sorry for him. It was that moment where he's like, I've got to go. It's again, it's the duty versus desire theme
Mhm.
of my desire is to put Aegon the second on the crown and secure House Hightower. But my duty is also to the realm and to my friend who I do have an affinity and connection with Viserys. And that moment was just kind of like closing his eyes, like, it's like he's happy, he's sad, he's scared. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on there. At the end of the day, it just all adds up to kind of pathetic for me with Otto. And I mean, that kind of,
Absolutely.
I like it. Like, I like that this is where the character's going.
Absolutely. I mean, it all sort of crystallized for me when he says, "My father was dead 5 days after that 5-day
Mhm.
period."
That's it.
And he goes, "Yeah, it was a grim day." And he's like, "No, but it was a good day for you." Then there's that
Mhm.
really pregnant pause before Otto's like, "That's not how I perceived it, your grace." And it's like, dude, it's all falling apart here because you are playing the Game of Thrones and you are
Yeah.
trying to have it both ways, and you cannot. I mean, that's the our overarching theme of the 8 seasons of the original show. Like, love is the death of duty. How do those things get reconciled together? It's every
Mm.
character faces that at some point, and if these two did have a brotherhood and a real friendship, it's long gone.
Yeah.
It's corrupted everything. Viserys. It just took Viserys a while to realize that. So you can end up being a prisoner even within your what you thought were your truest relationships. Daemon certainly felt like a prisoner as Viserys's brother.
Yeah.
Alicent and Rhaenyra now both feel like they're prisoners within their own friendship, but also they're the only people that each other have at this moment.
Yeah.
And then, Massaria is another person who societally has been a prisoner and has been a prisoner of every customer that's ever abused her, of everyone that's ever bought and sold her across the sea. And she finally seized her rise, but it's at
Mhm.
the expense of everybody that she is now throwing under the bus in the information
Mm.
trade.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of what Viserys said in episode 3 of like what I'm sick of. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. He did not say he's sick of it. He did not say listen, but
Listen.
I'm
Listen.
tired of this nonsense. But he
Yeah.
says, I doomed to constantly anger somebody in the service of somebody else?
Yeah.
And I think that the show, this being the Martin world of this is sometimes our worst instincts, is telling people, yeah, you are. You are sometimes just stuck in that cycle.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, that prison, that yeah, again, the emotional freedom, the emotional captivity, and how it's played out. You mentioned Massaria. I do want to talk about that because it was I really like what they've done with Massaria so far. I thought
Mm.
the big scene we talked about it during the episode, but I think we even mentioned it last week, so I don't want to go too far into it. But like, I really love the scene with Damon and Massaria and her kind of saying, "You think I know you think you can keep me safe. I know you think you're strong. You never have to face the stuff I do. Therefore, the fear I came to you to remove is here." And then now we meet with her sometime later, and she's maybe kind of realized I'm going to have to take that own I have to take that fear away from me on my own. Not unlike it does harken to a little bit of the Varys stuff in Game of Thrones, the spider of
Mm.
his. It's a little obviously bigger scale and different, but at least right now. But her kind of getting into the information trade, spying on everyone. So I took it as Rhaenyra, but mostly Daemon and all. She's just in the trade. I really liked it. She's an intriguing character, a little bit of a wild card as the everyone plays the Game of Thrones up top, you know?
Yeah, because for as was presented, especially in that first one, when she's egging Damon on, encouraging him by his side, leaves with him. It seemed like, oh well, that's his girlfriend, that's his supporter,
Yeah,
that's his right hand. However you want to see that, she's in his camp. Now she has no camp,
yeah.
and Damon didn't even get a room for free in this episode. She said, "Pay on your way out." Like
Anyway,
she has evolved
yeah,
well, I guess
mm,
it's been a 3.5 years since we've seen her.
yeah.
So
Oh,
it's a really interesting way to see these characters still
mhm,
intertwining, but having to grow, and how we can't grow sometimes in the same path as people, even if we are friends with them, even if we have a romance with them.
yeah.
Grow apart is a very cliche thing to say, but in a fantasy setting, that can be very combustible and terrible for lots of people.
Yeah, yeah. The reality is sometimes in the world you realize even with some of your best friends or even sometimes family, the only thing you have in common is the past and not necessarily the future, and that might lead to some breaks. And I think that's something Massaria in some ways probably did. And I don't know. I'm just kind of enjoying the climb. I enjoying the opening up a nice, proper eating house and room and board and working her way up. I'm really interested to see how they use her in the rest of the series. So,
Yeah.
and it falls into the captivity thing. I love that exchange. Am I am I your prisoner now, or am I your captive? And like I was yours. No. So yeah, it's all there. It's all baked in that big theme you're talking about.
Yeah, and by the end of it, everybody is arguably more isolated than they've ever been.
Yeah.
Rhaenyra is alone in that room
Mhm.
at the end. She had that scene with Viserys where we, the audience, were like, "Yes, the same page. Yeah, they're gonna fire this guy, and yeah, there was some drama, but we're back." And then no,
Yeah.
here's this potion or
Yeah.
tea.
Yeah.
It's fantasy. It's a potion. There are made up ingredients in there.
I
And
was
this
I was looking up the moon tea ingredients earlier. I'll look it up while you're chatting, but yes.
but yeah, so she's more isolated than she's ever been. Massaria and
Yeah.
Daemon broken up. Daemon exiled now twice. Will he actually go back to Runestone? God
Yeah.
only knows. It
Yeah.
kind of looked like the Veil in the preview for next week, so maybe we will see
Yeah.
some Veil action. He looked like he was a little lonesome in that one shot of him.
Yeah.
The Corlys and Rhaenys literally just being like, "We're not going to the celebration," and going back to Driftmark, separating
Yeah.
himself.
I love that.
Everybody has that moment, and even at the end
Mm.
of their wild night of partying, drinking, seeing a play, and almost having sex, they're
Mhm.
both alone by the end of that. Everybody. Not
Yeah.
one person comes out of this with any type of union. Even Kristen Cole, who maybe thought, I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
his logical brain, he knows he can never speak of this because it goes against the vows of the
Yeah.
Kingsguard. But what she perceived as a moment of like, "Hey, boyfriend," when he walks in, like, "Come here,
Yeah.
come here." He's like,
Yeah.
"No, I'm here to work. We're not good right now.
Yeah.
No one's good
Yeah.
right now."
No one, yeah, the Game of Thrones way. No one's good right now. I was
Yeah.
looking up moon tea up on the wikis there. Moon tea is made generally by maesters and wood witches out of tansy mint, wormwood, a spoon of honey, and a drop of pennyroyal. Now, there's a note at the bottom that comes from like George R. R.
Mm.
Martin. He added some fantasy touches as the actual recipe can be very dangerous and should not be tried in real life. So, just a little disclaimer for anyone: don't try to do the moon tea in real life, please, and thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, some big stuff there. I want to talk about the big one, if you want to, about duty versus desire. And again, we've already talked about it a lot, but like Alicent is stuck between those worlds and has been for a while. Otto,
Mm.
Viserys stuck between what he wants to do, what he needs to do as a king, what he wants to do and needs to do as a father. And I love the kind of the reminder. Your word is law in this land. So and once again, Viserys makes a big decision following something Daemon does, right? It's this
Mhm.
pattern that keeps repeating. Daemon does something, then the king acts. But I really think we should go to the Rhaenyra of it all. She is very much at the center of this episode, good, bad, and otherwise, where the entire world of this realm is too concerned and trying to be too controlling of her desires,
Yeah.
both in her expressing her sexuality in the bedroom and beyond. Where marriage is viewed as duty. She correctly sees it in a lot of ways, at least the way it's been presented to her. That idea of just being stuck here and producing heirs for the king, and the way she kind of says that to Alicent. A lot going on, but all
Mm.
kind of centered around this trip to the Street of Silk. It was like the first time I went to Vegas when I was like 17, and we walked through a casino to get to the other part of the hotel with my friend and his family. And I was just like, this is like a world of sin, and this is making me happy. I really liked this whole scene, the way it was played out, the way it was shot, the way it was seen through her eyes, even going up at the Kristen Cole stuff. So let's dive in. Duty and Desire with Rhaenyra. Alden, what'd you think about the Street of Silk?
Well, what I loved about that is how it contrasts with the opening when we're on tour, because we're starting with what should have been just a midpoint of the tour. It's supposed to have a few more months on it, and she cuts it off early.
Yeah.
And we're there at Storm's End. The idea is all of these locations, each with all of its own options, lines of men, different
Lines.
ages, different offerings, different perspectives, too old, too young. I loved her dig at this guy, like, "Oh yeah, and my grandmother, do you remember her being beautiful?" And he's like, that was 50 years ago. She's like, yeah, that's my point. Oh, that was unseemly, princess. That whole thing being all these options, and then a woman makes a couple of choices for herself. One evening, not even a full evening, sun's already down, one partial evening of joy, and all choices taken away. We go from you have all of Westeros all the way to the you will be with Laenor without protest. Right. And I thought that doing that in one episode, and that being alone with just this potion, far cry from I'm on this ship with Kristen and we're going around and seeing everybody, that journey within the journey, I think really says it all about what price you pay when you defy duty. You didn't do your job, and now you have no choice.
I love what you're saying. I really love this. Love it. It's tragic for a lot of ways for Rhaenyra, but it's going from that great scene in the previous episodes where, Viserys is like, you're gonna marry, but I tell you what, make your own choice. And the tears, the joy, the sense of connection that you, gosh, they're on it, as you've said before. It started from that. And again, a lot of it was the doldrums, but there was a little bit of humor, a little bit of spark in Rhaenyra, and then what happens? The wide-eyed innocence turned to adult experience, shall we say? I loved all that, and that's what I think you're unearthing a little bit more, Alden, for me. Why I really love that choice at the end, and how alone, how absolutely alone she now feels.
Yeah, and I think that if we're going to go full like AP English class on this, the idea that her room in the Red Keep has the passageway to freedom, and now she dare not ever open it again.
Yeah.
Like her room actually is like the party room. Like it has it has sort of, it reminded me, big Harry Potter fan being since I was a child, it has the secret passageways out of the castle to go and have fun, something that Harry was very into, something that, Luke Skywalker just wanted to go to Tashi Station. Everybody in those positions of youth and fantasy settings has that, like, but it's right. It's literally right there. It's right there. And then Daemon, I this is completely headcanon. The implication, I think, that usust to be his room, because as princes, so it's like here's the map to awesomeness. Here you go. Here's the map to rock and roll.
What even scribbled like something, I don't know, Bart Simpson would write, or
totally
Charlie,
a plan.
From It's Always Sunny, like extra cheese here. I love that. I love that. X marks the spot for fun. Yeah,
truly. And now she's there, and it's Kristen Cole doesn't know where the hidden door is. Only she does. But it's like it's sealed up by fate. It's sealed up by circumstance. It's you're truly cut off. And so for her to be there, with the combustible element that sparked that freedom, even though he did hurt her and leave her there, and they never had it out after that, and they probably won't for a long while. He's now gone, because that was the thing. You can see the light enter her eyes when she's returning from this tour that she's cut short. When she hears Caraxes, she reacts before anybody else, like, Uncle D, like, he's here. Like, you see Caraxes land in King's Landing, and all of a sudden this miserable tour might have a little bit of spark to it. And leaning into that joy costs her everything. And that's something that we see even all the way later on with her descendant, one Daenerys Targaryen. Perhaps you've heard of her. She has these moments too of that when she meets Barristan Selmy, like, oh, I'll play with this child. Oh, it's a child. Oh, it's gonna be such a fun moment. Someone tried to kill her, and I'm gonna try to have this relationship with Dario that's just fun, free, and sexy, and then gotta leave him. Doesn't work. Can't do that. Like you can only ever leave the confines of your expectations for so long, and it's just so just sad. It's just you if you empathize with these characters at all, you feel like you're there, and you can go to any moment in your own life, like Las Vegas at 17, and realize I've been there. I've been in those situations.
Mine ended a little different than Rhaenyra's. We'll say that. It just was a trip to a casino, but I connected with where it went out. And you talked about it up top, but also again with Clare Kilner directing the scene. She's got 2 more episodes this season. You're absolutely right. It wasn't just simply a role reversal. It was shot so truthfully that this was what Rhaenyra wanted. the desires. In the inside the episode thing, I think Claire just simply said, "Hey, girls want to have sex too," and that's a jokey, simple way to look at it, but that it was shot this way, and I was uh, the way Claire, the director, talked about, I knew I had to shoot this in a certain way. Now, mind you, this was one of the big criticisms of some of the stuff in Game of Thrones, where it wasn't, some of the reliance, over reliance, just the actual use of rape over and over, just got, is irresponsible and inappropriate and tiring for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But even if it's there, to be conscious of how you're doing it. That was the big problem with the Sansa scene. It was the focus on Theon's perspective and not Sansa, and this is a complete different vibe. It's a scene full of choice. It's a scene celebrating the choice. But I really did feel it was through her eyes again, saying that again. But I really loved your notes there about the Kristen Cole scene of again, he's got some vows. He's got to be, he's got a job. This is a workplace romance. There might be some rules. But we know deep down he's feeling it too. But that it was all through her, the undressing of the clothes, the control, the choice and scene. And again, there's some ramifications as always in this world. But I really love that the big center of that episode being Rhaenyra and Desire over duty in this moment.
I mean, she takes his primary piece of protection, the helmet, the thing that protects him from certain death. There's one piece of armor you want to have on, it's that, and she takes it and playfully will not give it back. Like 3 or 4 tries he tries to take it before
he tried.
He realizes what's going on. And this woman gave you status, she rose you up from nothing. Now she's really into you and she's got all the power, and it's like, you're gonna defy your princess? Like, I'm sure we'll get some more Kristen perspective on this, but in that moment it is made, I thought, and again, this is just my take, it's my take as a man, but I thought that it was elegantly handled in terms of, this is joyous. This was shot in a classy way. It's not overly explicit to young people. It's very obscured. It's from the distances. It's through the curtains. It's through the, the grating of the thing off to the side, the shades, and it's playful. Like, I'm not going to give this back to you because I need to be a human being in this moment, until he finally acquiesces and goes along with it. So it's people desperately trying to be people in a land like this is one of the biggest themes.
People who need people. Yeah, no. Yeah, it just really worked for me. And they played the show itself is played the connection between them very well. Rhaenyra and Kristen Cole, and just him being selected by her and what that meant for her in that moment, and her knowledge of the world of that time and picking the right night. Him explaining, I get you're in a tough spot. But you use your spot to raise me up, as you mentioned, Alden. And so the connection's there. We've seen the connection. It's real. So nothing about this was cheap. It's tragic. It's got some stuff that's probably hanging over it, and some stuff that's yet to be resolved, not just with them, but just the whole situation around Rhaenyra. But for this moment, again, in this series so far, 4 episodes in, has been mostly somber, mostly serious, of a serious mind.
We did not pick up at people's, those first 9 years of Viserys seemed pretty chill, but that's not where our show was. So that, Jaehaerys is invoked several times here. The lingering spirit of somebody who was good at this hangs over House of the Dragon, in contrast to how the lingering spirit of the Mad King hangs over Game of Thrones. They're coming out of the worst. We are coming out of the best. And where can we go from there? Nowhere great is the answer. Spoilers, nowhere great.
Nowhere great. On the other side of this joy, this unbridled joy that emerges again from, I don't want to lose track of the fact that Daemon in this moment, even if he does feel some connection, there's obviously some connection between him and Rhaenyra. And, we'll just leave it as that for the Targaryen family, and they work out some of the details themselves there on their family trees. But
Alicent, Lady Alicent said it very plainly.
It also made me think of Daenerys telling Jon Snow a little, so this is what we do.
I mean, cut to I think Cersei and Jaime both in different scenes. I can't remember who words it what way. I think Jaime might have said, like, this was what Cersei used to say, but both of them in some form were like, oh, so it's great. It's perfectly fine for the greatest house that ever was. And now all of a sudden there's a problem.
There's a problem.
And we're sitting there with our pizza and our chicken wings, like, makes a great point.
He's right. Yeah, but you take this. So outside of Damon, and what I'm starting to say was Damon using Rhaenyra in this moment. Let's be clear, even though there was a lot of choice in the situation, it was a manipulated choice. I thought that the bigger and better choices for her come after with Kristen Cole. I thought, but he does open her eyes there a little bit, but from that, put that with the images of Alicent and the rotting king on top of her, and that was shot through her eyes for me too, which was horrendous. It was horrific to experience that from her. It was unfortunately very real, and just again, duty, desire, and how do you get through this? And Alicent's always been one to be like, I think I've said this before, but it reminds me a lot of Kira in Solo Star Wars Story before she merged power, with this idea that, you know what, you can't win, you can only serve.
Yeah.
And that's what she's there for. And how do you survive within that? And I'm going to make my plays and I'm going to rise within that. But you're always going to serve. Sorry, Han, you're always going to serve. And Han's kind of like, F the rules. We can win. We can do this. I think we're going to win. And that's the key to that story. One of the key themes in Solo Star Wars Story. And I just got to see it here with Rhaenyra and Alicent. Alicent's like, what's the point? This is the system. I'm going to try to survive within it, with Rhaenyra always saying, I'm outside the system. I'm taking the tunnel. I'm taking the tunnel to Happy Town as many times as I can to circumnavigate the system. But then at the end, now I'm just free flowing here. And then just to end up kind of almost right smack dab in the middle. That's it.
I mean, first of all, I just gotta say, whoever that woman was that played Kira, I think she's got a bright future ahead of her, and she should do it. She should do a fantasy thing at some point.
Yeah.
But that connection I love. I actually last week had taken Rhaenyra and Alicent and compared them to Anakin and Obi-Wan, of the whole idea of these characters that, whether we're a Dark Lord and an old master or just two knights training, we're having the same conversation, and we're having the same falling out, and we're having the same thing is recurring. We all have those people in our lives where it's like every single time that we interact with them, if we peel it all back, no matter you got long hair, short hair, gray in your beard, no beard, new job, old job, you're having the same conversations and fights with these people. And so to see those sort of at play here, and then as the women are then separated into their own evenings, they have that nice moment at the luncheon, and now we see what their evenings are like. The horror for her, I mean, I don't mean to make light of that at all, but I did legitimately have they're banging, because when she says the king has asked for you, I was like, I wonder what they want to talk about. Like, I was a moron in that moment. I was an innocent summer fool moron. But she's like, the hour is late. I was like, yeah, the hour is late. What the hell? You guys were just talking.
He's up late answering emails. Wow, he's a hardworking king. Yeah,
you forget to say something when you were in the bath. Like, what's wrong, man? Like, save it for tomorrow. And then I was like, oh, yeah, she does have a kind touch. She did say that. So seeing that, I mean, and again, it's another level of horror too, because I feel for both parties. Feel for her primarily, and the scene is shot through her gaze. We only see Emily Carey's face, which I loved. You don't see Patty actually acting out that sexual encounter from Viserys's point of view, but we're also seeing this guy try to cling to any type of life while he's very clearly going out, like while he's very clearly falling apart, trying to cling to any kind of kindness, but he also is disregarding the only person that gives him that kindness earlier in the episode by laughing off her suggestions and things. So everybody is sort of pooping where they eat, so to speak.
Well, no, I like what you're saying there, and that, him, right. You don't see his face in an exchange, but him kind of reaching up and touching her kind of snapping to and giving him some sort of attention in that moment, other than the act. But it is sad. It is. I think it is him kind of flailing for any kind of true connection and true support. But you're right. Often with Viserys, it seems like a lot of his troubles come at his own doing.
Absolutely.
A lot of his own troubles are caused by himself there with his actions. I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah. And both brothers are doing that. Both brothers are trying to cling to any type of authenticity. What they share in common is a great many things. Great many things. It's a phrase I can't say without slipping into Ian McDermott in some form. But the idea that the ways that they differ outweigh the ways that they're similar. It's like if they both actually were able to have a conversation and discuss clinging to relevance, clinging to legacy, clinging to any type of youth. Damon revels in their youthful days. Like he says, you and I, when we were princes, we tore up, the streets and we went out there. We were in all the brothels. And the way Viserys is like, I moved on from that because I had to, because I was chosen. They'll never actually be able to reconcile those two perspectives because of the fact that Viserys has it and didn't want it, and Daemon wants it and can never have it.
Yeah, and I love the line too. If you're not a conqueror, you're a plague. And this idea of Daemon, he's conquered the Stepstones in a way. He's holed up at Dragonstone. If he wants to go to the Vale, he can go there. He's the rogue prince. But to me, that's I wonder. This is not even necessarily tied to themes, but I just wonder, Alden, like this idea of Daemon in his heart knows he's not a conqueror. He knows he's a plague, and how much that drives him. And how much he, just like you said earlier, like this, all right, I'm reborn. This is who I am. I will be the plague.
Yeah.
How destructive it is. Yeah.
We've invoked Star Wars a couple of times. I mean, it's the Rey and Kylo, you're a monster. Yes, I am. That ownership, believed or not, it's ownership is a choice. Ownership of the roles is a choice. And I was saying on Twitter before that I think that Daemon Targaryen, who was I was already, and I own this, I was predisposed to love this man. I was ready to love him going in, and that's a big part of it sometimes, whether fans of anything want to admit it or not. You go in arms crossed, you're going to have an arms crossed experience. You go in excited about that actor, you're going to give them that attention. But with that, I genuinely think, even in script form, Daemon Targaryen is the rogue character for today, for 2022. Like, I see the things that he's struggling with, and I see myself, I see my friends, I see people in our online communities. I see people that I've worked with. The ideas of, I don't want to be perceived. I want to be left alone, but I'm also desperate for a connection. Stop labeling me. Stop taking my narrative away from me. In the social media age, that's a big problem. In entertainment industries, that's a big problem. Youth and anxiety, and where we're a medicated age group of 20-somethings that all want to break through. And of course, there's a generalization. Speaking for myself there, but this idea of can I just be real? Is Daemon Targaryen not enough? Even when I bring a great victory, I still feel like I'm being presented a certain way. Like, even his great victory, he's immediately put into a social situation he hates.
Well, it even ended that letter from the king, like, I'll help you and I'll save the day. And I think there's a lot of that. Again, going back to that scene I love with Mysaria, kind of giving him the news, not this week, but the previous episodes. It is very much of this time. Daemon represents a lot of the audience that needs to get what's going on in this world, but also in ours, and they need to hear some of the message. And I thought the Mysaria scene was basically, again, like, your intentions with me, Mysaria, might be good. I get it. I believe your words that I'll protect you. Don't worry. You do not understand from your privileged position that the pain and danger you're putting me in. And that just made me think a lot about what Daemon means for us. And I love your expansion of that idea. He is the rogue prince for these times.
He is. He's the rogue prince of the modern day. You hear it all the time in joking ways and in serious ways. I know from a lot of people in my peer group, I don't want to be perceived right now. I would rather deal with being lonely in my home, especially in the COVID era, than go out and have people make assumptions, go out and have people ask me about my job, ask me about my this and that and the other thing. And there's a lot of that going on. And with the Rhaenyra and him parallel too, it's interesting that Kristen Cole and her have a conversation in the previous episode during the hunt of that whole thing of, well, I could have married a common born woman. Well, at least you would have had a choice. Well, a lot of people would kill to have your choices. Now she is sort of the Kristen Cole to his Rhaenyra when he's talking about, I feel so bad. I can't remember his wife's name, and it's his fault for always calling her derogatory names. Lady Rhea Royce.
Ray
Royce. I think that's what it was.
I'll look that up.
So the bronze biatch, as he calls her, and he's and it takes Rhaenyra reminding him, like, well, you know what? Like, you got it pretty good. All right, your wife's a nice lady. She's been doing well while you've been gone. Like, she tries to give him the reality check too, but you cannot change people's perspectives when they are in it and you're not. It's very hard to find a one-to-one in this life of someone where you're like, oh, you actually do understand. That's a rare feeling.
Yeah. Also, yeah, I love. We don't do a lot of the Easter eggs and connections. I forget that his wife is connected to Sir Raymer Royce later on that we're gonna have spend a lot of time with
That's
in
the
Game of Thrones.
giant breastplate guy, right?
Yes. Yes.
I always remember him as giant breastplate.
Giant breastplate guy is also other way to look at it. But yeah, I was looking at the houses here live online. Yeah, I love those connections. Anything big here in the time we have left here? What have we left on the table? We talked about Damon. We're talking about those hard lessons. Otto getting the boot. How does that? Where are we at now? Looking at next week and beyond here.
I think the last element to touch on, especially as it pertains to next week, is this idea of trying to control the connections almost in an isolationist versus like globalist type way. There's a little bit of that going on too, with we just stamped out this problem that was caused by who we perceive to be these dangerous foreigners, all that. Oh no, they're taking these islands over here, the Stepstones, and they're a pirate alliance, and we destroyed them. They're done. But then there's this idea of like, oh no, Corlys is going to try to use that to legitimize the other country. That's even worse. Like, so this idea that, again, Corlys too, in his own way, despite being one of the older guys on the scene, a veteran, having built an established house, being the wealthiest man in all the lands, even he can do things that go outside of expectations that mess with everybody else. And bringing Bravos into the fold or not is an interesting sort of like geopolitical Game of Thrones problem. And we have our knowledge of Thrones of knowing that, Bravos is still, by the time of King Robert, still a very distant and separated thing. Only really the Iron Bank do they have a connection with, and Syrio Forel, really. But that's the ideas of we don't trust anybody, and we're trying desperately to insulate. You hear that constantly of the goal for everybody, just from different angles, is for Valerian and Targaryen to come together, which would just be isolation on isolation. Let's try to fortify. Let's try to build an alliance of dragons and ships. That way no one can mess with us from any point in the world. And there's a huge paranoia there that I think lingers all the way down to Ned and Robert talking about things like, can the Dothraki ever cross the Narrow Sea? Pfft, no. And that hubris and that isolationist mentality had to be built, and it's being built here.
Yeah. I love that stuff. No, and the Sea Snake is absolutely a man of the world, right? Those 9 voyages took him all around the world,
so and that makes him a rarity.
And made him
a rarity now,
successful, but a rarity, and someone who maybe understands. In a way, it's not a maybe a bit of a stretch, but I just it's like Prince Oberyn, the Red Viper, has that same kind of I've seen the world, and the world's all right. Don't be afraid of it. Connect with it. Connect with your desires as you want. So I love that kind of connection. Interesting, and to see how that plays out. And we know Corlys has been out of this was out of this episode. A lot of him last week, of course, and his family. But his shadow. You're right. You said it up top. It looms over this episode too, with all the big decisions. And in a lot of ways, his decisions force a lot of hands. Literally, maybe hands.
Yeah, and they've done a great job. I think that one of the concerns that maybe was out there in the zeitgeist doing a show about House Targaryen specifically at their height was, can we create reasonable threats for them that are credible, that feel like they can actually threaten the House of the Dragon, this dynasty that has at this point, by the end of the show, like setting 17 dragons will have been in play. It's like, we've got like Balerion the Black Dread. His last rider is on the throne. His daughter's got a dragon. His brother's got a dragon. His cousin's got a dragon. What is money to those people? And the scripts have done a great job of showing still a lot. That still matters a lot. Ships, money, marriages, they are immune to none of that, tying all the way back to Rhaenyra saying, we think we're gods, and we're not.
And we're not. And we're not. Big stuff. We got some big stuff coming next week. I'm excited. We got maybe some weddings gone wrong, or another ice cream social, but this time gone wrong. We're gonna ramp it up here, and I think the switch is going to be happening soon, as we're going to take some bigger leaps forward. But I'm really looking forward to spending a little bit more time, at least one more big episode with Emily Carey and Millie Alcock as Rhaenyra. I've had a lot of fun with these two performers and the life they brought to these characters thus far.
Absolutely. Same here. Well said. I think that they've done a great job of building and building and building and building. And based on the preview, it looks like this is going to be the explosion where they're going to
Yeah.
be able to play all the different shades. It looks like it's going to get violent.
Yeah.
Weddings in this world, not a great track record.
Yeah.
Not a huge sample size, but even then,
Even.
still not great. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited for that, and I think that they've done such a great job. We're nearing, next week will be the halfway point of the season, and this has been, I think, some of the strongest. I'm not trying to, I know you know this, but just for the listeners and viewers, we're not in the is it better than Game of Thrones game where that's not what we're doing. But I do think that when the chips all fall, we're going to look at this as one of the strongest foundations of any season that we've had in this world so far. It really has been beautifully done.
I really think House of the Dragon thus far has just been really confident in what it wants to do, and it's doing it, and we'll see where it ends up, and we'll see what expectations build for future seasons. But I'm with you on that too. Yeah, not comparing, not at all. It's you're going to make you're going to look across the room at the other show all the time. The shows work with each other in that way. But yeah, I agree with you on that. There, a lot of good stuff happening here. Big stuff coming next week. We're about to sign on out. I want to thank all of you for watching and listening, supporting Casterly Talk, whether it's our Rings of Power deep dive discussions. Thanks to those who are spreading the word about what we do on that side of it, or what we're kind of always here for, the world of Ice and Fire. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for listening, watching, subscribe on the YouTube channel. We are building and growing on that. The podcast still going strong. If you're on Apple or Spotify, if you want to rate and review, we really appreciate that. It helps build the channel and the podcast up. You can follow me at Ken Napzok. Go to my website, kennapzok.com. You can follow us at Casterly Talk. And Alden, I keep one eye on wrestling news, my old business. I was in and out of the wrestling business for 20 years. I love it.
Yeah.
And I saw Octo Radio show up in the wrestling news world this week. You've had a lot of fun. Tell them where they can find you and your shows and the big charity event coming up.
Yeah, my goal in life is just to cross the streams of everything that I like. So it did bring me some joy. Once I get Dua Lipa in a Star Wars, I will ascend to my next form. Octo Radio, AHCHTO Radio, everywhere you get your podcast. That's the 3 different shows that I either host, co-host, or produce, all in the Star Wars realm. We just had Mercedes Varnado on, perhaps best known as Sasha Banks, multi-time WWE Women's World Champion. Women's tag champ, and also Koska Reeves in The Mandalorian talking about Star Wars. It is a Star Wars interview, but come on, wrestling does come up. So it was picked up in the wrestling world. And then Ryan Johnson, who just premiered his Knives Out sequel to thunderous applause and acclaim, everyone saying he last Jedi'd his own first movie. Let's see how that goes, and you'll be able to see him talk to me. Podathon, September 17th, 8 p.m., raising money for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. You can donate now. All those links are everywhere that I have just listed. If you hit up Octo Radio, if you hit up my profiles at that Alden Diaz, you will see them. Let's raise some money for some children. And that's going to be really exciting. And when we reconvene for House of the Dragon, that will be in the past. And so we'll talk about it then.
Big busy weekend for you here. We're going to have a lot of fun. For those who listen on the podcast side, you can leave a message. I apologize. I got a backlog of good calls in about House of Dragon, Rings of Power. We're going to be collecting those and doing audio only episodes soon as well. Just bear with me. It's been, there's a lot of content to cover, both in Game of Thrones, Rings of Power, and Star Wars. So it's been a wonderful time to cover this nerd world. We'll do it more. That is it for this week, my friends. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. We'll see you next time. We're going to have some fun at a violent ice cream social on House of the Dragon. See you next time on Casterly Talk.